Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Luer, and today we're crossing over to Oakland, California to catch up with Tracy Benson, female entrepreneur and former athlete, and now the CEO of a company called Obsesh, which is a marketplace for athletes. And we're going to go deep into what that, of course, means. We're going to have a great look at Tracy's illustrious corporate career. And, of course, before being a pro athlete, and I'm sure all of those things is how it came together, what she's doing now. So welcome to the podcast, Tracy.
Thanks a lot, Marcus. I'm so happy to be here from all the way across the pond in the West Coast of the U.S.
Yeah, we're literally 12 hours apart here. And it's always good to have my morning and your later evening there, or earlier evening.
Exactly.
So, Tracy, tell us a bit about your early part of, how it all started, a little bit of what you did in college. And, of course, you were a pro athlete in the game of volleyball. So talk about it, and then we'll go along the lines of all the fun things you've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll just start a little bit backwards. Started out, as a chief marketing officer for the last, dozen years. Really got to dip my hands into building brands and building iconic brands and products in the consumer space. But, I go all the way back into some of the things you'll peel back later. Had a few years in the agency business with the advertising world to really understand and learn marketing, understand advertising and all the great, tools and tactics of today's media mix. And prior to that, I was what I call stacking it high and watching it fly. I was building one of the most iconic growth brands called the Home Depot. Unfortunately, you don't have that, but it's pretty popular here in the U.S. And prior to that, I was playing a couple years on the Pro Beach volleyball circuit, which was very early days. It used to be called the Women's Professional Volleyball Association. Now it's called the AVP. And grew up in Chicago, went to college, got a nice little degree in marketing and finance and an MBA. And here we are today. And I'm doing, the best thing for athletes worldwide, which is the CEO and co-founder of Obsesh, a digital sports platform.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's go in. Exactly. We're going to go deep into some of those parts of your career. And so you were at the Western Illinois University and you were an NCAA volleyball player, right? I guess you were, let's call it a student athlete.
Yes.
Which again has obviously dramatically changed now with new rules, etc. How athletes are, even student athletes are now able to start monetizing. I guess they're just before we're into getting all the other stuff. What's your thought on that as a former student athlete?
Oh, I couldn't be happier. I mean, I don't think there's a student athlete anywhere of any year and any time, particularly in the U.S., that wasn't waiting for this day to come about. It was a rule and a regulation that was set about, 50 years ago. Right. Think about 50 years ago, and here we are today in a world of the digital era, a world of personalities everywhere, professional athletes, and everybody's just building their brand and their personality and able to monetize themselves in all kinds of new ways. And college athletes still couldn't do that. I'm such a big fan. It is such an honor to be a part of this change in this era and supporting what we call amateur athletes and NIL, name, image, likeness, through Obsesh platform. So I'm so psyched. Every day is like a new day in the Wild West, but it's a wonderful day for every student athlete there is.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And I keep asking that different folks, especially obviously from the U.S., and the answers are a bit varied. I had someone who was a bit more on the administration side. He's worked on sort of as a athletic director at various universities, and he had a slightly different point. So, but I don't want to debate that now. That's less the point of this podcast. But it's just interesting to see, I guess, the differences. So you also have an MBA from Notre Dame. And then, like I said earlier already, you played a few years of pro beach volleyball. It was beach volleyball, correct? If I got it correctly.
It was. It
correct.
was.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about it because that's 4 or 5 years of your life there. Tell us a bit about those early days because we're talking, and maybe gives a little bit away your age here. I'm sorry about that. But we're talking here.
That's okay.
1987.
There's something about wisdom in life.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I said.
87 through about 92, 93. I tried to play a little bit after that, but I got to be honest, good bathing suits and a six-pack ab doesn't pay the bills. So eventually that career came to an end.
But as I said, this is, now let's call it 3 decades ago. And again, so I'd always love those stories a bit about, go into it a bit about, what was it like at that time? It's all nice and good. What is that Pro 2 now, and the AVP is, is reasonably well known. But, how was it 30 years ago when you started? I'm assuming it was, very different. So just share a little bit with us.
Yeah, in some ways it was really, interesting, but you only know the times that you live in that point in your career, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not until now when you see how the AVP is picking up momentum, but still, quite frankly, struggles with many of the same things that were happening 20, 25, 30 years ago. Right. And so, coming out of college, actually, let me kind of go back a little bit. Going into college, that's all you dreamed of was playing in college. Right. And to be able to have a full ride scholarship to pay for my, room and board and my books, and to be able to have that was incredibly powerful on a lot of levels. One, it was a dream come true to actually go to college and play, right. To be a starter right out of the gate in college, whereas, many athletes go into college and they sit for a year or two and, so I could play right away. And, the fact that I could live my dream every day, it just fueled more momentum for me when I got out of college, as I could see the end coming near. The only thing I could think about was, I want to be that athlete that's just continuing on and becoming a professional, and I can make money at it, and I can keep going, and life is going to be great. And, I did that. I got out of college. I bolted right down to Miami, put my feet in the sand, started playing, and I was an indoor player my whole life.
All right. Okay.
So it's a tough transition, but what indoor player doesn't dream of putting on a great bathing suit and playing on the beach all day?
Okay.
And, so,
you don't mean that sarcastically. You mean that is true.
No,
yes.
No. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, right. Exactly. Especially if you grow up in, Chicago, which is, it's like, my parents are Swedish, so Chicago is like Sweden on a cold day,
Right,
so
okay.
Who doesn't dream of going to the beach? So I head right down to Miami, playing on the beach, got a great partner. We're working hard. We're training all day, every day. We're doing all the things that you did in college. You're very programmed as an athlete, especially an athlete that's competing. The higher your level, the more programmed and the more training and rest and hydration, all the things that you get into routines. Right. The only thing was, we could win a tournament and we're winning a case of Pepsi.
Wow.
Okay. Well,
okay.
You know what I mean? Hear that loud, right? You're winning a case of Pepsi.
Yes,
you have a sponsor, at the time it was Mosimo, which then became a pretty mass brand, but it started out as a very beach kind of surf brand. But, the same thing that happened 25, 30 years ago is happening today. If you're a niche athlete and you're not playing in the Premier League, you're not playing, MLB in the US or NBA or NFL, especially as a woman and a woman in a niche sport, you can't pay your bills. And so the kind of cool thing about all athletes that still exists today is you learn how to game the system. And what I mean by that is you can live for a week on 3 meals and a box of cereal. You can, find your way when you get injured to Most athletes have a high tolerance of pain. They'll work through it.
Right.
You learn to game your own life so that you can basically live on like $10 a month. But the fact is, like, you still got to pay rent. You still need to build a future and a financial future. And so while it was a ton of fun, I can remember calling home to my parents several times. I was living with like 3, 4, 5 roommates at different times. It didn't even matter. Right. But because I was playing, and I can remember calling home, "Hey, Dad, can I borrow $200 for rent?" Right. You know, and my dad would say, "Are you really borrowing it, Tracy?" Right. Sure, definitely. Right. You know, put it in an envelope, send it down, you know, to Miami. There was no like wiring money to anybody or Venmo or whatever you want to say, you know, Swish. Right. And so I did that numerous times over several years. And then I started like getting part-time jobs, working at Chili's, you know, Bar and Grill at night. Or I can remember in college, we'll get to this later about NIL, but in college I was like, don't tell anybody now, because maybe they'll take away some sort of like honor I had. But I was working at a cattle auction for cash to make cash on the side because you weren't allowed to work. Right. And so that, you know, we were so used to it, played, had a great time. But eventually, you know, my dad told me, "You've got 2 more phone calls, use them wisely." Right. I thought he was kind of kidding, but after the second phone call, he wasn't kidding. And that was kind of a forced moment for me to say, I can't keep doing this. I've got to get a job. And sometimes that's the hardest thing for any athlete, to move across that mental hurdle of go from playing, you know, because competing is a full-time career. It's just like you couldn't get paid for it, right? But the cost of training, the cost of your body, your time, the competitions, and you know, eventually that second phone call came to an end, got that other $200, and then it was time, as my father would say, now it's time to use your academic scholarship and get a job. Right. So that launched me into my, you know, my real first job, which was Home Depot.
Yeah. Great. I think it was a great start to the story, and it will definitely loop obviously back into exactly what you're doing now. We'll get to back later in with Obsesh. So it's I think, you know, you felt the pain, and I think that's pretty clear. What you're building now is all sort of full circle here. So, but let's spend a little bit of time on you know, your corporate career then over the next several decades, because again, I'm certain there are stories in there which sort of builds up to what you're doing now and how you learned, you know, how to build brands and build platforms and all this fun stuff, which is really what you did, I guess, right? And so you know, just you know, pick a couple of stories of your early part of your career there. You know, you were with Home Depot, you were Jack Morton, you know, there was Razorfish, etc. All, you know, all interesting brands, and certainly there are stories out there, right?
Absolutely. You know, that's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that. I'm going to start with my the Home Depot. So it was a time when Home Depot, and hopefully your audience and your viewers have at least heard of the Home Depot. If not, they've heard of the gentleman by the name of Arthur Blank. And Arthur Blank was one of the co-founders, and he's the owner of the Atlanta Falcons, huge in the community for women and women's sports, and was a big, you know, influence behind our recent election down in Atlanta, which was Georgia was a very big key state for us. So let me start with the story from the Home Depot. I learned so much from Arthur Blank. I took my athletics from my rigor, my routines that I just had as an athlete. And here's a guy that said, listen, I just want you to commit 5-6 years to me. You're going to build the shit out of this company. And my first question was, well, what is the Home Depot?
Right, okay.
I didn't own a place. I couldn't pay my rent. I've never built cabinets or done anything like that for anybody. And he was just a remarkable leader. And I remember we just built this amazing culture. Like every day you'd come in, and envision this, Marcus. Mm-hmm. I'd be dropped into a blank slate of a store that didn't look like a store. Me and 5 guys, we did this for six years, hundreds of them. Mm-hmm. We'd come into this pallet, a blank pallet, and you're like, okay, I'm going to build this market. I'm going to build this store. I'm going to hire all these people. I'm going to help these people bleed orange, as they say, right? Because Home Depot is all about the orange and the orange aprons. Right. And what was so remarkable, what I learned from that company was you can actually accomplish anything you put your mind to, because on a daily basis, I was challenged to build a store, build a market, hire hundreds of people, interview thousands of people, run operations, build a receiving department with some of the world's biggest companies coming in the door left and right, and tackle problems day in and day out. And the one thing I learned was how to really take my love of being a captain on the court and leading in a, volleyball indoors, typically a 6-person, on the court, right. But you maybe have 12 people on the team. I was always that captain, always that leader, but now I was like I was the captain of hundreds of people every day, and you'd start one store and there would be the 5 of us. And then a week later, because we did this in 12 weeks, every store, there'd be 10 people, then there'd be 20 people, then there'd be 40, then there'd be 80, then there'd be 120, then there'd be 200. And every day we'd get to the front of the store and you could turn around and something was different. The racks were up, the merchandise was in, the forklifts were out, the cash registers were getting installed, the garden hoses were like, all over, the lumber's flying in. Right. And every morning we brought everybody together at the beginning of the store at the front, and we just like rallied people to the point where people were just screaming and what we call bleeding orange. Right. And that culture was so incredible, because as you tackle problems all day, it's the strength and the trust of those people together when you've been through these hard things so fast. It just, that culture and that connection, people really want that, whether it's the customers, the employees, us working together, us going through the hard problems. It was fascinating. So
sounds like it. Yeah. It was called the hyper growth team, right? So that's what means hyper growth, as in setting up new venues and new locations, I guess, right?
Yeah. So we would go into a market, we would open 10, 12 stores in a matter of 7 months. Right. And we would just go one by one, take your favorite 10 people to the next store. From there, take 20 people to the next store. It really was, today they would call that scaling in technology. Back then, your platforms were literally these giant, massive, 40, 60,000 square foot stores, and you're filling them just like you're filling your digital technologies, fast and furious, figuring it out.
Yeah, well, it definitely sounds like some great learning there. Now, I picked one up here, which was you were Olympic Work Program Creator. I'm not sure exactly what that meant, but it was Home Depot a partner of the Olympics. So tell me about it.
So before the partnership with the Olympics, because the Olympics weren't really at that time bringing on big brand sponsorships, and the Home Depot was a relatively what I would say small as compared to now. Now they probably have a footprint of 1,000, stores. But at the time we were just building them dozens at a time. So it was in the real hyper growth. Well, as I told you, I was an athlete that just couldn't make it. So here I am with the Home Depot, and I basically start hiring all my friends who were also Olympians. So one in particular, Kent Ferguson, he was an Olympic diver, and he and Greg Louganis were the two, aspiring and, hopefuls for the U.S. And Kent, couldn't make any money either. And he was like, I can't pay my rent. And I knew that problem really well. And so Kent and I were really good friends living in Miami. And I said, Kent, just come work and set up stores with me. So he would come, and I'd be like, listen, if you can give me 4 hours, give me 4 hours. You can make a lot of movement in 4 hours in one of these stores we're setting up.
Right.
And then I would take another one and another one. And then, finally I went to Arthur Blank and I said, he's like, what is it with all these like Olympians working here? And I said, well, they can't make money, Arthur. So we need help. We need talent. We need strong athletes, just like you hired me. We need to support these athletes. And we ended up creating the program, which I led, of allowing Olympic athletes to work at the Home Depot part-time. And what was really revolutionary was we fought to give them full-time benefits and full-time pay.
Right.
That's pretty remarkable. You got a flexible job. And that turned into the Olympic work program at Home Depot, where we codified it. And now Olympians could come work there. And then that became the basis and the platform for why the heck wouldn't the Home Depot be taking credit for that and sponsoring the Olympics. And then I hope that program is still going today. People come to me all the time and they're like, oh my God, thank you so much, for that. Right. And these, even 5-10 years ago. And I'm like, for what? And they're like, the Olympic work program. I'm like, oh, that's so awesome that you benefited from that.
I love it.
So I would say my whole career has been a little bit like that. I've always been fighting for athletes to be able to make a financial future, because you got to be able to build some security. And so that continued on through all of my, CMO roles and head of digital. I was always sponsoring athletes, paying for them to be quote unquote, air quotes, influencers before that was a buzzword.
Right.
And so
let's talk about your next stop here, because from building shops now, let's call it that in the most simplest sense, you went into now much more the creative content side of it, right? You were involved in sponsorship, etc., with Jack Morton.
Yep.
So again, was it just a natural way to go there, or was that really more what you were really interested in, or maybe what you studied was sort of marketing and other things, or how do you go from building shops and stores and for Home Depot to creating stories and or being more on the creative side of things?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, it's definitely not a natural, expansion of my career. After I had spent all these years just moving all over the country and opening up, to your point, shops, big shops, which kind of resonates with me now today, because I talk to athletes about setting up their own shop. So I'm over here having a big smile. But that being said, what I really started to fall in love with, because again, as an athlete in college and an athlete playing after college, you're not really worried about, well, what am I going to do when I'm done playing? That's not even really a top consideration, because you're so focused. Okay. Right. So here I am, I'm with Home Depot by probably a little bit of luck. And I'm really starting to love what I'm doing, but I can see the path of connecting consumers with products they love to solve problems. But I just felt like if I stayed at Home Depot doing what I've been doing, which is opening hundreds of stores and, sort of building that format, I was going to miss out on really a strong point of view, especially when content really started taking hold and becoming important and advertising. I was going to miss out on the opportunity to really do what I would say is advertising right. And so I can remember I literally knocked on a lot of doors, meaning advertising doors. Of course, I'd call them and nobody would talk to me, right? Like, when was the last time you called anything and anybody talked to you? But I would call them and everybody would say, well, I'm sorry, you don't have any experience in advertising. And I'm like, no, but I've just built hundreds of Home Depot stores. I've seen and solved more consumer problems you ever will in your life, but I couldn't make it in. So I happen to, just like a lot of things in life, and I hope your listeners hear this, I was just open to putting myself out there. And so Jack Morton was actually an agency that said they were early in experiential and creating, what I would just say right now is real experiential, environments and activations. And they said, oh my gosh, well, we think we might be getting some Home Depot business. And since you just worked there,
you might know
I think you'd be great. You might know. And you know what I did?
Sense.
I just followed the path and I looked for an in. I took that in and I learned everything I could possibly about experiential marketing, which then basically gave me the platform to go into digital marketing. So with Razorfish, because digital was really starting to take hold. And I was experimenting with it at Jack Morton because I was leading all the retail accounts and the retail exhibitions and all the experiences. Okay, so we would get in there with some digital, doing some really cool things. Like I worked on the AT&T Global Network Operations Center. Like what kid from Chicago who's been playing volleyball and working at the Home Depot belongs in the network operations center? Not me, but I got a good chance to go in there and I built out this really cool digital, experience that they bring their top global clients into. And Razorfish came along and said,
that's,
come on over.
We're talking early 2000s. So, I mean, this is sort of now internet boom anyway, right?
We're talking the beginning of YouTube.
Correct. All those sort of things starting to, the internet boom and bust a bit time. But it was digital is, the word digital probably didn't quite exist yet. I think we still called it internet maybe at the time. It's starting to come, it started to happen, right?
Yeah. A lot of people forget it was only about 15 years ago that the iPhone really started to take hold with about 3% of, U.S. consumers. Right. And, 17 or so years ago was YouTube. As a matter of fact, Chad Hurley, who was the founder of YouTube and the CEO, is an investor in Obsesh.
Yeah, I saw that.
It was so cool, but I would definitely call that Web 1, right?
Yes.
Definitely. As we're approaching Web 3. Yeah. That was definitely Web 1. But what I loved about Web 1 was in a smaller environment, meaning there was less media, less everything. Mm-hmm. There certainly wasn't social media like Instagram, Facebook, right? So what you could really do was really experiment, and you had kind of a big palette to do that. And it was great to learn the creative process, the importance of content, just the real backbones of how the internet, technology, content, and commerce and communities come together. And that's what I think I really took away from, in particular, Razorfish, because we were really just starting Web 1 and really exploding things. And then I went to Best Buy, shortly thereafter, and was the head of digital there. And that really was the explosion of what I would say Web 2. Right. And so that just, the fun there was the world's biggest consumer technology company. Again, I'm living in a shop, right? You can see some of the threads here. Yeah. But I think the big thing is I've always been a builder. I've always been innovating, but innovating where problems and solutions come together. And that's part of what I find, the biggest challenge is there's always a solution to a problem. It's just, can you solve it? Can you find it? Is there a market for it? And what does that look like? And how do you build that path forward as, because I've always been an entrepreneur inside every one of these businesses. I don't care if it was Home Depot. I'm building from ground up literally all day, every day.
I saw you in Best Buy, you were talking about being the chief storyteller. So talk about what is the story you guys were telling about Best Buy and how does that relate to now being storytellers, of course, athletes. That's what you're trying to teach your athletes, right? To be a storyteller.
Yeah. So it's a storytelling, people relate to stories. There's an emotional connection, and the more digital we get, especially as I see, I've been in the consumer space and studying consumer tech, and consumer behaviors my whole career. The more digital we get, the more people want to connect and come together. And the way they do that is through stories. They do it through stories, Instagram Reels, or they do it through TikTok, or they do it, Web 2 was they were doing it through YouTube. You were hearing the stories of everybody and anybody. And at Best Buy, you've got the world's screens that everybody is consuming and starting to like pick up. And what was really complicated in the very beginning of all this growth of technology was how to use it.
Right.
What does it do for me? Right. You can remember, I can point to hundreds of people. I would be given a keynote speech at like a big giant retail or a World Wide Web, conference, talking about this smartphone is going to be your best friend in your pocket. I mean, of me saying that, 15 years ago. And I can remember people saying, I don't need one of those. Well, like the story we were trying to tell at Best Buy was really about not technology for technology's sake, because I think what we learned in storytelling is nobody cares about features and specs. Right? Nobody cares. What they care about is what's going to do for my life, is going to make me feel something better, different. And it's kind of like a Disney movie, if they didn't tell you a story, we'd all be bored for like 2.5 hours. And so we were trying to tell that story about not technology from a features and specs perspective, which there was a big component there of years and years where every single one of our vendors, the only thing they talked about was a better feature, a better mousetrap, a better spec. And so we were trying to say to everybody, it's not about that. It's about what it brings to your life. The fact that you can sit on this phone and be entertained by whatever, a word puzzle, a Pac-Man going across the screen, or the access to read a really emotional like email or text message from somebody that you love or you haven't talked to. And so that's storytelling. We tried to bring it forward in everything and anything and put it on every single screen so that people realized you're not buying specs and features, you're buying stories that connect you to other things in your life.
Love this. And you said earlier, you were head of digital and then later on head of marketing, or that's at least the titles I guess you carried. And obviously on the back of it, you ended up working with, also the other brands, right? From Beats to, Fitbit
hundreds.
and GoPros and Twitter and so on. And I guess that's, again, is huge learning there, I guess, how to, maneuver that digital space and or some of these other brands, which are doing very cool stuff. So, and that somewhat led a bit also, I guess, to the next job then with Monster. But, let's talk a bit about it. What was the learning, again, in the digital marketing space, working with, sitting on the, let's say, Best Buy side and then, working with these groups, what was the big takeaway there during those times? And again, we're talking sort of 2008 to 12, right? So, interesting
2000,
time.
yeah, 2009 to, 8 or 9,
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. So if you kind of go back to those, like the 2009, it was still the iPod era, right? You could put a Walkman in your pocket, so to speak. And it was just really starting. We were really struggling at Best Buy, which was probably, I would think, I might not get this right, but I think we were probably selling more records than anybody in the world.
Okay.
Best Buy. Okay. So that's a lot of
CDs,
records.
right? I'm assuming that wasn't real records anymore, right?
It was still LPs.
Really? That was LP at the time. Okay.
It was, there's always a vintage crowd out there that loves those LPs, but it was CDs. It was, the real threat was streaming music. Right. Napster was a real threat when people could start ripping down, peer-to-peer.
Correct.
So what did Best Buy do? We bought Napster.
Oh, really? Okay. Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Okay. But, so here you are, this era of, you're starting to see the shift. You've got Web 1.0, which is, YouTube has started and everything was about dancing cats and broadcasting yourself,
Right.
and Facebook, I would meet with them in those very, very early days. Mark was a kid. He had like 3 or 4 people working for him.
Wow.
And they were trying to find a business model, same as Twitter, trying to find a business model that they could start to monetize, right? Because they had these eyeballs. And so that whole era of like eyeballs were everything.
Right.
And, you've got this like great technology, all these vendors. And I think the real learning that I saw, I had this palette where I could influence many, many, many vendors. We were looking for them to drive footfall traffic into the stores. Right. So we had to work really closely. And I think probably the biggest thing I learned there is early on, we, myself and one of the other merchants, part of our job was to break open categories where companies had a real lockup on market share. So take Bose at the time, Bose,
Yep.
In audio space.
Yep.
Bose had the lockup on headphones. Like what pilot or dad wasn't wearing a silver headphone, you know what I mean, when they're sitting on the plane.
Right.
And so along comes, Jimmy Iovine, notable, no doubt, Dr. Dre, who has a lot of shelf space of those CDs in Best Buy. Right. And these artists would come into campus all the time and sing and perform, and because that's where the sales were happening, right? It still wasn't the Spotify and
Correct.
Apple ecosystem. And so I think one of the biggest learnings I had was, in particular with, I would say with Jimmy and Dre, and at the time, Beats was really a record label with Monster as a manufacturer. Okay. And they had this idea for a headphone. It was actually, they started out with speakers, but nobody thought that was a very good idea. And if Best Buy didn't think it was a good idea, you weren't going to go anywhere with that idea because Best Buy has the influence. Right. And so I think the real learning I saw was when we took some of these really small startup companies. At the time, Beats was not even a company really yet. They didn't have a product. They didn't have a box. They didn't have a headphone. They had colored pictures literally on a piece of paper. And to really go deep in content and culture, nobody is more connected in culture than Jimmy Iovine. He is just like, he is the guru of connecting culture to youth. Right. He's almost magical about it. And it's only, I would say, because he lives and breathes it all day, every day. And hip hop was not very popular then at all. Right. And so what we did was like, we took some risks on some no-name startups doing revolutionary things at the time. Having a black headphone was like off the charts for people. Okay. And we said, I mean, you'd think like,
I thought they were always black. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. And so, by taking a chance and really getting to know and understand how people connect to content, and content sometimes can be what they hear, what they see, what they feel, who they want to be, who they want to be like. Content comes in all different forms. And, one of the best learnings I had at at Best Buy was not just the way to operate big and at scale with hundreds and hundreds of vendors and billions of dollars and all kinds of tech integration and revolutionary things. It was like actually working with, Beats as a very young company. I had to help shape it. We took a multi-year deal with them. We put the power of our marketing and our assets and our platform behind them. And then we really watched, no joke, Jimmy Iovine, Dre, will.i.am, Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber. We supported every idea that they had. And what we did was we put these like small shops within a shop. Most people don't remember this, but we put in what we call like club beats. We built a small little club, put it in all the hot stores of Detroit, Miami, and West LA, and all these other places. And literally, like Will.i.am would, as if it was not planned, he'd come into the store and he'd start DJing. Oh, wow. Or Justin Bieber, who was like a kid. I don't know if you've ever seen our commercial we did with him and Ozzy Osbourne, but you should watch it. It's called 4G. But anyhow, like we would just really connect the content and the products to the culture. And the more you enable that, the more you bring those stories between people, whether it's some kid coming into West LA and all of a sudden he walks into a Best Buy and it looks like a club because we built this club Beats. That kid wants to hang out there and be that cool kid. Like,
you made Best Buy look cool. That is for sure.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, it was really fun to learn from Jimmy and Dre and learn from the growth of Beats. And we also had like a ton of mistakes, but in life, you get a lot of mistakes. If you don't have mistakes, you don't know when you're going to win. Absolutely. Right? Because everything just looks like a good, shiny trophy. And so we made lots of mistakes. Great example. We saw black headphones were pretty cool. And so the idea was, well, let's try red. It was like, red? Oh my God. No, not red. Yes, red. So we did red headphones. Red headphones took off more than black. It was like, ooh, there's pop of color.
Yeah, people like color options, right?
People got like colors. So we created, orange, green, white. Yeah. And then we started, playing with over the ear, on the ear, in the ear. Right. And what was really interesting is like you would think that everything you did would just become better, better, better. And then all of a sudden we would make a move on that. Like we did purple for Justin Bieber. I'll never forget this. Right. We thought, okay, red, black. People are going crazy. We're just like blowing the shit out of Beats. They go from $1 million in sales to like 5. Okay, think about 5 in a Best Buy store. It doesn't even move the needle at all. Yeah. Not even one needle, right? And then all of a sudden it's like 20. And all of a sudden, a year later, it's like 40. And then 40 goes to 80. 80 goes to 200. 200 goes, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so that hockey stick, it's all the work. I learned all the work between day 0 and about the 4th or 5th year. You set the foundation for the future, and that's really important for entrepreneurs.
What was the time when you then joined them? Obviously you were their global chief marketing officer, right? Or what was the exact title in Beats?
Monster? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Monster, right?
So when after several years at Best Buy, and I had done the big thing for so many times in so many years. What I really loved, I was always the innovator and the entrepreneur inside these companies, right? The builder.
The entrepreneur.
And the entrepreneur. And what I really wanted to do was go a lot deeper into digital. And I wanted to really own a whole brand because now I had all the parts and pieces that I had intentionally built in my career. How to connect with consumers, the consumer tech, the digital, the creative, the content, the commerce. And I wanted to be able to put that all together and really lead from a digital commerce and a digital perspective from a brand versus leading from what I would just say is a more traditional brand where digital sometimes is last thought, afterthought, or future thought. And so I took off from Best Buy, and I had spent all these years, intimately knowing and building on the Beats side. And Beats and Monster was the primary brand behind it. Beats was more of the front face and the manufacturer. And so I came out to California, be a part of what was, Web 2 and the digital revolution, and do it with a really cool brand that I could keep growing. And so it was fun. That kind of started my track as really starting with brands that were more in the like $1-2 million space. At the time, Beats was a lot bigger because we gave it the boost it needed it. Buy,
So it's really Best Buy in a sense who build it or help build them, right? It's a good story.
Exactly. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So I did that with Monster and a couple other companies, and
then I think you took the plunge, right? I think your first, what I swear at least see you here as co-founder, was with a company called Be Alive, which was then in the content space, right? I think it was already creating original content, unscripted entertainment, etc.
Original content.
So it was sort of a bit of a lead in into what it is now, what you're doing now. But talk a bit about Be Alive for a second here.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about it, but that was, I really wanted to take the leap and step out from, the bigger resources. Somehow there was a trend. I started out as a 2-person volleyball team, went to building big companies, ran big companies, loved the entrepreneurial side of helping start up and farm these smaller brands that had real passion points, and stepping out from that and going into Be Alive, to your point, was really the start of that. And what I realized with that was content entertainment was not really my thing. While I loved the content and the storytelling, I really didn't want to be necessarily in the business of creating, long form stories. And I think what I also learned from there is the importance of partnership. When you go into a startup, like I'd been in these small startups, I'd been building them, the important team and the importance of the skills you bring together, and the importance of, do you have a common vision? Do you have a common goal? Are you all mission driven toward the same thing? That's very important to me. And Be Alive was, a great experience, but it just wasn't my passion, exactly both thing. From the products and the content and the partner. Yeah.
Got it. Makes sense. Well, that tees up nicely to Obsesh, which obviously was sort of what I can see then your next big idea. So let's talk about Obsesh. First of all, let's make sure everyone understands how to spell it. That's obsesh.com is also the website.
That's right.
Again, it says it's a peer-to-peer sports marketplace connecting with the best athletes in the world for coaching and training, etc. And I've had a look. I've been playing around with it, and there's some really cool stuff. It's really across all the different sports I can think of, from wrestling to American football, ice hockey, field hockey. Of course, volleyball is in there. So it's really, and even esports. I saw some esports athletes posting things. So
absolutely,
yeah. So tell us a bit about we've now spent good time on your career, where you came from. How does that all come together? And, where did the idea of Obsesh came from? Was it you? Was it your co-founder? Or the two of you sitting there having a drink somewhere? And tell us, how did it come about? And of course, then we go into where you are now.
Right. 2 women walk in a bar in Berlin, and we come out with Obsesh.
That is true? Or that's the story?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
But yes, we've my co-founder and I have been in bars in Berlin. That is true.
Right. Fair enough.
So my co-founder, Jonlyn, I met her originally at Beats when Beats was very young. So I was at Best Buy. She was working with Beats, direct. And so we've known each other for a long time. I think if I go back to the genesis of like Obsesh, and for everybody here, again, translating across cultures, and I know, I might speak a little fast sometimes, but Obsesh stands for obsessions. So think of your sports obsessions. What do you love? What are you passionate about?
Right.
What do you want to do? And so Obsesh is the leading digital sports platform for, we've got NIL here. We talked a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
And the amateur athletes, the niche athletes, what I call the 99% who are not, whether they're not making a lot of money, like myself being in that position, or these Olympians who don't have this support. We really started out, building a digital sports platform where we can connect athletes and their fans together. Again, bring those stories, bring that magic there, help athletes get film analysis, help them, the young aspiring ones be part of the sports cultural moment of what was it like doing that flip in the end zone when you caught the touchdown, And so I saw this opportunity and this timing again, where consumers really wanted the athletes, and athletes really needed a way to make an income. And so by bringing together a business model that puts those two parties together and makes it really simple for an athlete to come in, set up their own shop, pick their products. We build plug and play products, whether it's like an appearance or coaching or mentoring or a virtual workout, whatever it is, we make it easy so that athletes don't have to be operators and distributors, because they aren't. And they could just focus on that experience and that story, and that connecting with each other. And so we started out about 2 years ago. We came out of the top world sports accelerator called Stadia.
Right. Yeah,
Stadia
I was going to
Ventures.
say, you went through the sort of accelerator route, right?
We did. And we were like one of the top 5 last year, and got some great, credibility, global rankings from like Sports Tech X, which is a European group, gave us top 5 global ranking. But we really found this opportunity and wanted to help athletes be their champion, because the sports industry is not motivated to figure out how to solve for the 99% to be able to make a financial future. Right. The sports industry is motivated by teams, leagues, and the platforms and spaces that they've built to monetize the top 1%, and to do that with like maximum power. Yep. And I just felt like there were a couple of things at play. Athletes are literally dying out of their sport because it's so much more expensive today to compete and train, because the quality of the training is so much higher. The cost of competition sometimes. If you're a tennis player or a golfer, you're paying to play. They're not paying you, right? And so I just saw this opportunity to build a model and build a technology that could scale and simplify and give athletes their own business, to become their own entrepreneurs and be owners of their destination. And the way to do that was take this connection between what consumers and fans love, which is their favorite athletes and idols that they want to be like, and what athletes needed was a way to do what they're really good at, which is help inspire and help train and help teach others and mentor what they know. And so we started out that way, with that thesis that if we can create a technology that could connect athletes, and fans, what are the products that would be the natural place? And so the natural place, when we worked with hundreds of athletes across all kinds of verticals, was, I want to mentor, I want to give back, I want to help that kid that can't be watching me on, in the Olympics, or can't come see me, or can't get mentored because of, I can't afford that. We started with the thesis that if we could give every kid a giant network on their phone of athletes to tap into, and they would support the cost of what the athlete was looking to make to do that, then that would be a win-win. So we started out with the coaching marketplace as an easy, what I would say, first product. Mm-hmm. But again, just like Web 1 and Web 2, we're moving into another digital era. And as the web gets more complicated and as products become more standardized, we saw an opportunity in working with the athletes, especially in the U.S. college market, the amateurs who are younger, they're more digital savvy. They want to build their brand. They know the value of like, I got to start my career right now, right here on day one. And we hear it all the time. Even the top like female basketball player at Notre Dame, Olivia Miles, her very first word on day one of one of the top U.S. basketball programs was, I'm a freshman. I have 3 years to be the best athlete I can and set my career up and build my brand. Right? So they're smarter. They're more digital savvy. And so when NIL, which is the name, image, likeness, was deregulated, meaning any U.S. college athlete now, it seems crazy to even think this has been a rule, but any U.S. college athlete could now be in charge of their own name, image, and likeness, and could now work to sell their brand or their marketability or create their own cool T-shirts or do coaching. We took that as an opportunity to really focus on helping and supporting these younger athletes just by the nature of how many there are. There's like 450,000 a year.
Sorry, would you say
help
that...
them have a,
sorry to interrupt you there. Would you say without this ruling, part of what you're trying to do with Obsesh might have not even been possible before? Or...
Yeah, I think it would have taken us a lot longer, because when you look across all those 99%, like the skiers and the snowboarders and the surfers and the skaters and even the Olympians, many of those independent or niche athletes, they're so fragmented everywhere. Right. And a lot of them are solo athletes, meaning they don't compete with others. They train alone, they compete alone, or they compete with the team for maybe 12 weeks. So I think it would have taken us a lot longer, for sure.
Yeah, sounds interesting timing, even, right? Looking back at it.
Yeah. And Marcus, we were looking at timing last year coming out of the accelerator. We already had a real in-depth understanding and knowledge, just by the nature of our work and our careers, around what was happening in sports, the federal courts that were, trying to decide, and the conferences that were panicked. And so we started hustling 2 times faster, which I know that's hard to do in a startup because you're already going 100 miles an hour. But we started going 2 times faster on the bet that originally 7 states would have deregulation. What happened was everybody got it at the same time. And so we had a little bit of a head start, nice. But it's still very much in its nascent form today here, the market.
And one thing I love is how we started earlier, of course, is to me it appears that, you're literally about 30 years later here, that pain you felt as an athlete, as, trying to make a living in a career, you've now turned that pain into your business. And I think that's really cool. Not sure you ever thought of it that way, but that definitely sounds to me that way, just listening to you here for the last hour.
I think it's been a 30-year pain, actually. I just didn't have the guts, and there wasn't the right timing and the opportunity. When you grow in your career and you're literally growing in your executiveness of your career, there's a lot of things you're just not often willing to give up, like great vacations, long vacations,
nice
great money, great bonuses, great paychecks, all the things I do not get any longer today. But that being said, it was such a mission and such a passion. I thought to myself, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? There's nobody better like experienced or prepared to do it. Is it going to be easy? Hell no, it's not. But I've never done anything easy. I've done things that make a difference and things that I'm very passionate about. And at the time, it wasn't even a big, hard decision. It was the 3 years or the 5 years before that where I was like, how can I help? Should I do it now? Oh gosh, I think digital is going to get a little more accessible. Oh, I would watch things like Patreon, Airbnb. I'm living in the West Coast and I'm living among the digital innovators of the world.
Absolutely.
And I just kept thinking to myself, why isn't somebody doing something about sports and athletes to create an athlete economy? Why isn't somebody doing it? And nobody was interested. And I thought, God damn it, if it's before I, retire, before I stop my career, why do I need to be a CMO for somebody else's stuff anymore? I am going to do this. And if it's the last thing I do, which I hope it is, the last thing I do, I hope it's going to change their future for every generation to come. That's my hope. Yeah, and it might not even be me that does it,
So obviously you took that pitch on the road, and you said earlier, right, in the accelerator, there was Stadia Ventures. You have a couple other illustrious investors, HBS alumni, angels. You mentioned earlier, YouTube founder. I think you raised $1 million. Maybe you raised some more by now, but that's sort of at least what I could see.
Yeah. But $1 million sounded good at the time. I just didn't want to say 1.2, 1.3, 1.
Always a good start.
Yeah.
So now, of course, you started this. It was sort of early 2019, and pretty quickly after, we have a little bit of COVID happening here around the world, which in your
a lot of it.
Exactly. Now, in your business, to some degree, that wasn't a bad thing, or maybe not even as much of a deterrent as it would have been if you were in a true physical world. So how did COVID affect you? Did it have a positive effect? Again, people are stuck at home. A lot more online is happening. Many online companies grew a lot during that period of time. How did that impact you guys?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there. We're born a digital technology company. When I'm talking to investors, when I'm talking to, the world, we're a digital sports platform, that connects athletes with their fans, sponsors, communities, and supporters in all new ways. But we're a digital technology company. And so during COVID, I think, listen, all of us have forgotten, but those first 3-4 months were just plain awful for everybody. Mm-hmm. We were in the accelerator and, we figured it out in the accelerator in terms of like, how do we go through an accelerator that's traditionally in person? But it actually made us stronger because, to your point, a couple things happened. People had exponentially more time. They had access to Wi-Fi almost everywhere, at least in our country. You can get it pretty much everywhere. So they had more time on their hands and they were needing more relief. So there was just a lot more consumer behavior where, no doubt 5 years from now, the same behavior, we'd still be at this level. But I think it got it really accelerated through COVID because of just the conditions. Right. And so, we can say streaming TV was never going to take over, but we all know it was, right? It just happened faster. Great. We know digital is never going backwards. And I think because a lot of companies who relied on that physical, tactile, in-person experience now had to figure it out in a digital way in order to survive. I think it made a lot of people stronger. What it did in the sports industry was a little bit different. And it may have benefited us, although, I have a lot of compassion for the athletes that all had their careers stopped, that had the Olympics stopped twice. Right. And a lot of them just didn't compete when it was like, it's on, no, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Okay, I'm done.
Moved around.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so what happened was all the people that, had been getting even their little salaries, a lot of those salaries came to an end because if you don't pay, if you don't play, you don't get paid, right?
Before, absolutely.
And so for us as a business, it forced us, while we were always a digital sports platform and a technology, it forced us to relook at our products. And so we looked at our product through the lens of virtual and helping athletes adopt virtual. It seems natural now, but a year and a half ago, it really wasn't, because and so it made us stronger. It also gave athletes more reason to connect with us, and their friends were telling their friends, and their friends then calling and coming on. So we grew by hundreds of athletes really fast. Right. And what I'm really proud of is a lot of them were willing to put themselves out there and to get started. And, so for us, it wasn't a downfall. Internet accelerated, digital experiences accelerated, the trust that people built online accelerated, right? Because even in my pursuit of fundraising, I live in Silicon Valley. Everybody was like, you got to come in the office. If you're not here, you don't matter. And now it's like we all get time back. We see the wasted time we spent in cars and on trains and on planes. And we've been really fortunate to build relationships throughout the entire sports industry. As a matter of fact, we've, had conversations with like the city of London, who has an aspiration to be the most walkable, exercising, active city. Okay. We probably would have never had that opportunity, or to talk about Paris, 2024. Right. And so I think it built trust. It accelerated our business. It also forced us to really think through the lens of all things digital. And now that we're coming back, the US is, I think, much further behind. I spent the summer in Sweden, and, I was speaking in Amsterdam. And so culturally, I feel like a lot of the world is a little bit further along than the US. We're still like the West Coast is still pretty quiet, pretty closed down. In particular, San Francisco, people are not back to work. They're still working remote. Okay. And, whereas in New York, you're starting to see the hustle and bustle, and it's kind of a hybrid. But I think what it did for us is it forced us to think about ourselves as a digital only company, because we're a California company. We don't have an office anymore. We're willing to hire people from all over. So it increases our talent, increases our trust. Yep. It brings other challenges, because I want to get all 500 athletes together all the time. Right. And we just can't, I want to get my company together all the time. So what we got in benefits as a digital company are huge. What we're challenged with is, how do we create a hybrid environment? And I'm just curious, I don't have the solution for that quite yet.
Yeah, I think we're all looking for that one. I agree. And I can share some of those stories of how exactly we shrunk into a more digital or online company versus being physically in offices. But now I want to touch on a couple of more things here. One is of course, the NFT world, which you sort of also getting in. So let's we talk about Web3 here, but also the part about when you bring these athletes in, right? You help train them a bit, or they just do their own thing, or what is it sort of how you work? And I'd love to talk a bit about the monetization part, because when I went in, I saw everything from $5 for whatever, what sort of first trial something, to $18 and $20 and $50. So I'm not sure whether it depends on what it is you purchasing, but it seems there was quite a few different price points. And of course, if you can share that, is love to understand a bit what you share then with the athletes. What is it? So what's the company cut, etc. So let's go into a bit of the nuts and bolts of the platform and how you guys make money together with the athletes.
Yeah, so that's a big piece of, I think, the advantage that we have is we really serve the athletes first. And so we always let athletes set their own prices because we feel like they're the best judge of their own value.
Okay, so that's why you have all these different numbers flying around there.
Exactly. Yeah, so the athletes set their own prices.
Okay.
And oftentimes, we see some athletes want to make themselves really accessible because maybe they didn't have access, to somebody at an affordable price. Other athletes, have a combination. One product might be one price, another product might be another. And they might also, have a high love for like really digging into the community, maybe the Boys and Girls Club. And so they'll do things for free. So we let athletes set their own prices. And whatever price an athlete sets, they take home 100% of that. So if an athlete's charging $50, they take home $50. We charge a commission on top of that. Whatever the athlete wants to take home, we charge a percentage on top of that. And that percentage, of course, is paid by the consumer or the sponsor or the supporter. But the athlete always sets their price, always takes home 100% of it. And then we don't charge them for being on the platform at all.
Okay.
And so there's a commission fee. We have found in our work, and, who knows, business models are changing left and right. But we have found in our work, the fans and the supporters and the sponsors, they don't mind paying the commission fee because they want access to the athlete and they actually want to support the athlete. So whatever the athlete sets, they take home, plain and simple. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me just make sure I got that right. So the price they're setting, so let's say it's $20 for the videos and the coaching they do, that stays with them. Let's say sponsors and other partners you bring in, you take a cut of that and then some goes to the asset. Was that correct or?
No. Every product that the athlete sells, they set their own price.
Right, correct. And they keep 100% of that, or you are taking
and they
keep
100% of that. We take a commission on top of that. So if an athlete sets a price for $50, we would take like 15% on top of that.
Right. So so let's call it, mark it up, if that's the right word.
We mark it up. It's very similar to like Airbnb. You as a homeowner are going to set your price. Right. Airbnb is going to charge you a platform fee for the transaction, the support, So we work the same way. Athletes. So we serve athletes and we also serve what's called NIL collectives. And so collectives are largely a U.S. booster club that supports the athletes for name, image, and likeness.
Okay.
And so we give the athletes full support. And I'll tell you the top 5 things that athletes want is what we've made sure we solve in our platform. So biggest thing they want to do is they want to make money.
True.
So that, we've already tackled that, right? Yeah. They get to set their prices. They take home 100%. We charge a commission fee on top of that. That is for the platform use, et cetera. They don't pay anything to be on the platform.
Right.
Whereas on Airbnb, you as a host pay a couple percentage. So we don't charge the athletes anything.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're a sponsor or you're a fan. If you're buying a product or a service from the athlete, whatever they have set, that commission is on top of that.
Right.
The second most important thing for them, all the athletes, is their personal branding. So the ability to build their reputation, to create commercial value for that, but also to live their true, authentic, self or being. And so we help athletes. We give them support, marketing, promotion, social media help. We help them guide and shape their personal branding, we don't try and change it. We try and take what they want to be their brand, what they want to stand for, and try and help them through education and, the services we give them, like marketing, et cetera, to bring that to life. And so we've actually built what we call Athlete Academy, and that's an online digital course that all the athletes on Obsesh get for free, and they can learn about social media. They learn about all those things. So that personal branding is, importance number 2. That's the biggest problem they want to solve, where they want support. The third is around contracts. So contracts could be anything from, as a college athlete, in the US, it's important you have a contract when you're working with a sponsor, because you want to stay compliant with our, governing conferences called the NCAA. Yeah. And those contracts both sometimes just manage as an athlete, your intellectual property. Yeah. And, it helps you protect your brand. It helps you, instead of having to go file a trademark at the trademark office, you set out a smart contract that includes your design and your, original art. Right. And we take contracts and we make them plug and play for athletes. Wow. So that they don't have to go hire attorneys. We have standard contracts for everything, for appearances, for camps, for, autograph signings, digital autographs.
Okay. And the athletes have access to it for free, or how does that work?
Access to it for free. Wow. Yeah. So we give them standard contracts. Love it. And because we put all of our products, when they're transacted, it's happening, on blockchain. Those contracts stay attached to that, and that becomes part of their records, right? Okay. And it's all very transparent. So we give them standard contracts. And let's say you're an athlete and you're like, okay, for my appearances, I want to sign autographs for 2 hours, but I'm not going to sign these things. I'm not going to write on somebody's arm, or I'm only going to sign a basketball, whatever it is, right. Or I'll be there on Friday night. They can customize the standard contracts, but what Canva has done for designers, we've done for athletes on Obsesh. We've made everything like totally simple, plug and play. Wow. Pick up the contract. You want to add an extra line, add a line, okay. And then the fourth thing is social media. It's such a big part of the digital savvy young athletes and fans. And a lot of athletes, even some of the people that you're talking about in the pros, they're overwhelmed by social media. Right. They don't always have the time. So our team gives them the support. You can send a bunch of content to us. You have like a platform coach, if you will. That platform coach manages a portfolio of athletes. Right. They get to know and they help you do it all. Cool. And then the other thing is in the US is, what they really care about is the new name, image, likeness rules. And so we help them navigate that by making sure everything they do, we understand what your school wants, what they don't want, trademarks and branding, and help them navigate that.
Wow, I have to admit, I'm glad we went through this here, these 5 points, because I have to admit that is not what when I looked through the platform, what I saw. So the impression was more, is the coaching and some of those things which we talked about earlier, but you're really going much deeper, and like you said, from helping athletes with their branding, contracts, social media, and of course NIL rules, I guess. There is a ton of services. So if I'm an athlete, that's definitely the place I would want to check it out. I love that. Very cool.
Yeah, and that's what athletes love about us is we're not just technology. We're humanizing the stuff they do and making it easy for them.
Nice. And you leave a lot of money for them there. So that's, of course, because funny enough, I was just not sure how much you saw that Twitch just changed the policy in terms of how much money they take off the streamers. They went from, there was previously to a 50-50 now, versus, let's say, if you take Facebook, they take, it's 70 to the creator and 30 to Facebook. So, YouTube. So there is a huge difference again in this, right? And I know there's a big outcry, and I'm certain it one way or the other, Twitch will lose, some of those content creators, and clearly
Yeah.
in the these are different type of content creators than what you're necessarily talking about. You're talking about more the athlete here, but there are similarities with with when you're a streamer.
Oh, absolutely.
And, this is always a blend now in many ways, especially if you look at esports and gaming again. There's a lot of similarities there. So I like that. That's a really cool part of it. Now, maybe just to wrap it up here, so how many athletes you have currently on the platform? What is it sort of, if anything you can share, the growth of the company in terms of revenue or others or whatever are your KPIs you're measuring, and where you're heading with it, and before we sort of starting to wrap it up here.
Yeah, it's we're on the high growth. We're still an early stage company. I mean, when you look at NIL, our vision is to be the leading digital sports platform for, NIL in particular.
Right. It's a massive space.
Yeah, we're in heavy growth mode because we're 13 months into the deregulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where these college athletes, these student athletes can now start to monetize, and it's still so nascent. I mean, I think probably last year, there's no hard factor figure that anybody has, but I would say probably about 10 or 15% of the athlete market at college in the US participated to some level in being able to monetize their name, image, likeness. I would expect this year at least another 25 to 40% because just like anything, you get more comfortable. And so we're in heavy growth mode. Heavy growth mode for us is making sure we got the right products that these athletes can pick up and not get overwhelmed with. They can just pick it up, put it in their shop, start to sell it, and learn from it. And then so the onboarding of athletes, the new athletes, we continue to grow probably 25 to 28% every quarter in athletes. Right. And our biggest challenge right now from a success standpoint is how do we scale thousands at a time? Right. We're not yet there. Right. And so that takes a whole other level of, automation of training. We're automated for our onboarding, but not automated fully in the training. And the more you train these athletes to be creators, the faster they're going to learn, and that inspires others. So we're off to a really great start. What I really like is we've got great brand reputation as Obsesh. We have strong trust. A lot of the athletes refer other athletes. And now we really have found our sweet spot as a solution for some of the universities and, the collectives that serve the athletes. So we're doing well.
Plenty of growth ahead of there.
It's keeping me up every night.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, I think earlier we were meant to talk about NFTs, and we kind of skip that a bit. So sure. Let's go back to that for a second here. So you are launching an NFT marketplace, which again sounds very natural. Again, what the content they're creating and or other images, things build around it. But NFT is not an NFT to it's not the same thing everywhere. I'm assuming you're not building the next NBA Top Shot right now. So what exactly is your NFTs are all about? And sort of explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So. NFTs, I think for a lot of people is a very abstract thing. Like, what the heck is it, right? Right. And, when we think about NFTs and we think about blockchain, it comes down to two things. It comes down to the decentralization of both your content and your assets, but doing that in a way that you can maintain the ownership and maintain transparency and control of that, right? Yep. So when we look at that and we really stepped back, you're right. It was not about creating another boring ape or another Top Shot trading card. It was really about being able to have fans, sponsors, supporters engage with athletes in all new ways, but using NFTs more as a utility, where that NFT becomes, a secure digital asset, because we're just continuing to move into more and more content, more and more digital assets, more and more contracts. And how do you manage the digitization of all those assets? And so we're using NFTs in some pretty everyday uses or utility cases. So as an example, if you want to set up a membership community and charge your members on a monthly basis or an annual basis, and maybe you're going to drop them some exclusive content or even give them a t-shirt or whatever, we're tokenizing those membership passes as an NFT.
Okay, makes sense.
Right? It's a non-fungible token, which means, that asset's going to live and be recorded and ledgered in a very different way.
Right.
Now, you can also create a really cool, we've got some athletes that are working on more digital art, right? Yeah. It's like a whole series of, we got a college athlete. He's got a great brand. It's called Battle Island. And, he's printed all these t-shirts. Well, he can sell those t-shirts in the marketplace. But he could also sell the digital twin of that t-shirt.
Yeah, got it.
Right? And so what we're doing is we're using the blockchain and NFTs as a way to really safely secure, authenticate, and manage products so that you can, you can manage those digital assets from here to the future. And it's really hard.
I love that.
Here's
a really crazy thought or an idea, and maybe you even thought of it already. We were working on a project was called Before There Were Pros, which was footage of everyone of Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James, and others. This is footage of them playing high school basketball and or college basketball, depending on what they were playing at the time.
Perfect use case.
Yeah. Now, okay, that footage obviously now is monetized to the cows, but this is old, 30 years ago again, where some of those rights weren't exactly that way, and the asset wouldn't have that own right to it necessarily. But we had footage of him of interviews of him training, etc. And if he trains in his backyard, that's his footage, right? Or if he gives tips of what he was doing.
Exactly.
Now you wrap that around an NFT, it might be only worth whatever $10 right now. Once he becomes a pro and is potentially the next big superstar NBA player, that thing could be $100,000 worth, right? So those are. I think that's another amazing use case for you,
head, Marcus. Right? You've hit it right on the head. We're living right now, and right now, we're at the beginning of Web3. Every single one of these athletes, to your point, if LeBron James looked back 30 years, or he was just starting now,
correct,
would they own and manage their content, their assets, their contracts, their royalty, their rights, their intellectual property different?
Correct.
I got to believe the answer is yes. And that's how we're helping them. That's what makes us different. We're not just a marketplace that's connecting people. We support the athlete. We're helping the athlete build a future financially from, that's why we say we help them maximize, and manage their revenue and their property.
And that's the beauty with NFTs, exactly. Depends on how the contract is set up. He has future earnings there forever, even if that NFT is sold and the fan, whoever, or the supporter who bought it at the time, if he still sells it and as the value grows, if he keeps his little 10% or whatever he has built into it, there are revenue opportunities down the line, and that's another one which I was listening to what you were saying. The fan part is so important too, right? And fans want to be part of that ecosystem, right? I think your focus obviously came very much from athletes who are not making money. Think of it, again, if you think about it from a fan side, fans never make money with their passion, right? And this whole concept of play to earn, or which is really a big thing, of course, in the gaming industry now, where saying, look, I'm playing all the, hours and hours of this game, but all I'm doing is paying for things, which is great for the developer and the companies who create these games. But it's, what is it for me?
Yeah, that's Web 2.
Correct. And so I think
Yeah,
there again,
it's
there is another
eyeballs.
angle to it that even the fans eventually with an NFT, of course, could earn something, as the athlete. They support it and they love watching when they played high school or college or whatever level. How they grew, and then one day maybe they become an Olympian, a gold medal winner, or NBA star. I think there's interesting links there. So I love what you guys are building there. It's very cool, and we could probably spend hours more talking about it. But we do have to be a bit sensitive on time, and for our listeners here. So let's start kind of wrapping it up, and I maybe just to. Finish it off. I saw another one where you became a founding member of something called Chief, which is, again, I think it's the think tank to empower women in business or in leadership roles. So just talk a bit about
Absolutely.
it. Some of the other things you do outside, of course, your own company.
Yeah, I mean, I've over my career, I think in the early days of my career, I was just trying to figure out what the hell is my career, right? Outside of an athlete. And so I spent a lot of time, what I say, floating down the river and just kind of like going with it and figuring it out. But over the last, I would say, in particular, maybe 5, 6, 7 years, once you accomplish certain things and you check those things off in your mind, I really started thinking about, what's the impact that I want to have? And I've always been a big fan of like empowering women, empowering, people that want to achieve more and grow higher and do more things and do the things that they thought were impossible. I've always been that way as a leader. But I would say over the last 5, 6 years, in particular, I think it really sort of hit me with the Me Too movement in the U.S. in particular,
right,
where I just said to myself, gosh, if I don't stand up and talk about, working with women, supporting women, I've always been a supporter of women, no doubt about it. But if I don't do it in a more intentional, outwardly public way, what message am I sending to, that college athlete who's unclear on how she's going to have a place in the world off the softball field? And so I just started intentionally putting more energy out there, outward, instead of just in my head and to my teams. I started putting it out there in the world by saying, as an example, with investors, I ask them point blank, do you have any women in your portfolio? If the answer is no, you know what I mean? Like, that's not somebody I'm going to support because you're getting an opportunity to invest in this company as much as I'm getting an opportunity to have your capital in this company. Right. And so I started really putting that out there. And in particular, there is a growing network of women. And, women are great community builders together. And so Chief is a good example of that. I was invited in to be part of that women's network. It is a great big pool of women from all walks of life doing all kinds of really cool things. And it's almost like LinkedIn, if LinkedIn had a real community and it wasn't just a bunch of messaging and posting, but Chief has a real, anything that gets big and is owned by Microsoft. I mean, listen, I worked for a company that was bought by them. It just kind of gets sucked into the world, Sure. But Chief in particular, I really felt their mission was to empower women and connect women for real stories and real conversations. And so I was asked to join Chief. I did that. We meet every month. We talk all together. It's really awesome. Even as an executive or a startup founder or a very successful, in any right woman to be putting yourself out there and helping other women. So I find it to be an awesome forum for that.
Absolutely.
And,
it sounds a bit like
heavily,
YPO. I'm a member of YPO, and I've been a member for decades. And it's again, it's sort of let's call it the young president organization. The word young is always with it.
Exactly.
When I was young when I joined them. But it's similar, right?
Exactly.
It's CEOs and entrepreneurs around the world coming together, and you learn from each other. And it sounds a bit like that's what Chief is, right? With a particular focus on women. Right? Cool.
Yeah, it is. And I also have, a heavy interest because I'm a, queer woman with a wife of 13 years. I have a great interest, especially in sports and in community, to also take a larger role in helping other people of, now we're living in a world where sometimes I'm even confused with all the genders. I'm like, what? You know what I mean? But I just, it's hard to throw a gay woman or a gay man off, but literally it's just a new and different time. And so I just think we have, I have an obligation now to intentionally bring people forward, empower them, talk about it, and be a part of, the voices that stand up and say, hey, listen, yes, all lives matter. Gay lives matter. Sports matter. Women in sports matters. Women matter. Everybody matters. Well, and so I've just taken a larger role in that.
Yeah. Wow.
With my own
power
voice.
to you. And I do hope that our conversation here, and of course the podcast we just did, will help with this and will spread that message. And that was sort of actually one of my last questions here is, though, obviously at the moment it appears very U.S. centric, and it looks like you got plenty of work to do there, especially in the college space opening up. But what are you already doing certain things around the world, maybe in the English speaking part of the world, like you mentioned earlier? You did some, you were talking to the London City, etc. Or is that part of the sort of future roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, listen, most athletes, we have right now, we're just exponentially growing on U.S. soil, in particular with the college scene. Right. So it's hard when you have a small company, to spread yourself. I mean, we're already spread pretty thin. I'm so sure yes. As that goes, listen, we see ourselves as a global sports platform. The challenge right now is exponentially, we've got so much demand on the U.S., but I would say more so on our pros. So a lot of the Olympians, a lot of the pro players that we have on the platform. Mm-hmm. And we've got quite a bit. We've got Paralympians. Right. We've got just about everybody. And they all are very much global citizens. I mean, it's no secret that, men's soccer players here go play in other markets. Women's WNBA player go play in 5 different markets. Right. Yeah. And, there's nothing I would like more than to be able to put a presence in every single one of these markets, because sports is a gateway for life, right? For passion, for life, for content, for culture, for community. And so for that, we're definitely a global company. And, but it's going to take us a little bit of time just to stay focused, keep executing here, intentionally go expand in other markets. But right now we get just the halo impact of athletes are everywhere. Right. And I think it's really cool for fans and for even supporters and sponsors to be able to come on to Obsesh and see athletes in all places and spaces of the world. That's also important. Well, so for your audience, exactly. If you're an athlete, come on.
Absolutely. Yep. So how would they reach out to you? What's the best way? Is just go to the website? Is there a way then to connect, or is there an email, or what's the perfect way to reach you?
Yeah, I think the perfect way to reach me is either by LinkedIn. I'm Tracy Benson, and if you just look up Obsesh, OBSESH, or you can email me at Tracy, Tracy, at obsesh.com. If you're an athlete and you're an athlete that's looking to, be your entrepreneur and get on our platform and get the support and services and everything else we talked about, send an email to athletes@obsesh.com or follow us at Obsesh Nation on Instagram or any other channel that, is in your market.
Perfect. That's and we'll make sure that is well spelled out in the in our podcast. We'll so people will find you there. Tracy, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for sharing all the stories here and being so open about all the stuff you shared here. I think it was lots of amazing stories. I think there's going to be hopefully a lot of people going to be inspired by your own career paths and you've come full circle to some degree here. And of course, what you are currently building there. So all the power to you. And if you're ever starting to expand outside, let's say, especially, of course, here in Asia, please make sure you give me a call and let's see how we can help you here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marcus. And I hope your fans enjoy this and you'll have some new fans from the U.S. already.
Definitely. Yeah. Appreciate it, Tracy. And have a good evening there. And we'll talk again soon.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Take care. Cheers.
The Sports Entrepreneurs by Marcus Luer podcasts are a collection of interviews and stories. All content in this podcast is the copyright of Marcus Luer. Reproduction and distribution of the presentation without written permission of the owner is prohibited. All rights reserved.